It's week 14. You know what we're going to do. Help you out at wide receiver and go through every matchup and talk about all the players who should be in or out of your lineup to help you get into the fantasy playoffs. And unfortunately, the bipocalypse for real is happening. We got 6 teams and a lot of good ones on bye this week. That includes the Ravens, the Texans, the Commanders, the Colts, Patriots, and Broncos. First, the must starts. Not a long list at wide receiver these days, but you can definitely count on Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, Jamar Chase, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. You definitely want to make sure you get the right players in your lineup this week, but also make sure you get the right picks in when you set your underdog NFL pick'ems. Look, this week, you still get a chance for a free new customer special if you're signing up for the first time on Underdog. On Thursday, once again, Jordan Love just needs 1 yard. That's right, take the higher on 0.5 total yards for Jordan Love when you make your NFL pick'ems. You get this freebie if you're signing up for the first time and you use code NGAME on Underdog. You also still get up to $1,000 worth of bonus cash on your initial deposit. Just make sure you use code NGAME when you sign up. So that Thursday night game should be a good one. It's the Packers at the Lions. Let's just get this one out of the way with early. The Packers wide receiver core. Who knows what's going to happen? Jayden Reed with all of 3 catches and yet somehow 2 touchdowns last week. So let's do that prediction thing where we try to guess what he does this week.
Who knows? It's so impossible to guess. It is a good matchup against the Lions. They give up lots of slot wide receivers, but you just never know with Jayden Reed. He could boom, he could bust. I'm going to say because it's a good matchup, he's solid this week.
There you go. You know, it's not even about target share with him or any of these Packers wideouts, touchdowns, which are totally unpredictable. It's a good matchup. He should be involved. Let's put him in the solid tier. And then there's Mr. Unpredictable, Christian Watson. Oh, he's been pretty quiet the last couple of weeks. Does he do anything against the Lions?
Again, he could. We saw last week, right? DJ Moore and Keenan Allen had nice games against them, but he's risky. He's only a flex this week.
Definitely can't go higher than a flex. Yes, he does technically have a good matchup on paper, but he's got to get those targets. He's got to catch the ball. He's a risky flex with a lot of upside. Now, Romeo Doubs did not play last week, but he should be back. Seems like he's on track, so can you trust Doubs?
Trust is a very strong word for really any of these Packers wide receivers. Risky flex.
There you go, risky flex. He is probably more than the other 2 touchdown dependent. Now for the Lions, still got Jameson Williams out there. He's been a little more quiet lately. What does he do here?
Yeah, it's not a great matchup. Not sure if Jair Alexander is going to be back this week or not. He's always got upside, but always risky. Just going to put him where I always put him. I just kind of like, take the easy way out and just say he's a flex.
I do feel a little bit better about him than any of those Packers wideouts. Again, at home, pretty good matchup. I'll at least say he should be a solid option this week. Now, Sunday slate, let's kick things off with the Jets at the Dolphins. I mean, I really just want to kind of give up on this Jets wideout core, but then you see they kind of show something, at least a spark, I guess you could say. Davante Adams seems to be the preferred target here. He did score a touchdown last week, but now he gets the Dolphins defense, which has been really, really tough against wide receivers. Should we trust Davante Adams?
He continues to be annoying and frustrating and somehow every now and then does something like last week and scores a touchdown, and Aaron Rodgers seems to like throwing him the ball with very little results, but I can't feel good about these Jets pass catchers, either one. I'm going to say Adams also just a flex.
Despite last week's results, I don't think I can move Adams too high. Again, the Dolphins have been really good against wide receivers lately, and so I'm not going to put too much stock into last week. Adams is still a risky flex. Now, Garrett Wilson actually got as many targets as Davante Adams last week, but he didn't seem to have the production. This is starting to get frustrating. What do you do with Wilson?
Same thing. I'm just putting him as a flex. He could score. Adams could score. Neither one could score. They're just flexes.
Exactly. How can you really differentiate between the two? I mean, Wilson should be smashing, but it's just the upside isn't there. So just flex. Speaking of highly drafted wideouts that should be smashing but aren't for fantasy, Tyreek Hill. I mean, okay, he's not a must start. He did score last week. I know it's pretty fluky, but is he still in the strong start tier even?
He's not. This week against Sauce Gardner and the Jets, who shut down a lot of wide receivers this year. Like, yeah, he scored last week, and you're going to see that and say, look, he had a nice fantasy game, but that pass was intended for Jonnu Smith, because all passes are intended for Jonnu Smith in this offense. I'm not going to say outright bench Tyreek Hill, but I think this week in this matchup, barely even a solid start, and I think that's only because he's named Tyreek Hill.
Well, I'm going to put him in the solid tier as well, though I feel a little bit better about him because he's still getting some targets. He still has scored some touchdowns. The Dolphins are at least at home, not in the freezing weather. But I agree, I don't feel a big game coming because it's just defense, even though it's been somewhat maligned, it's still pretty good, tough against wide receivers as well. I'll tell you this, I'm probably starting Tyreek Hill in most of my leagues, but I will take the lower on him on underdog. If you do those NFL pick'ems, you can get this one pretty early. Believe it or not, on the season, Tyreek Hill is only averaging 55 yards receiving per game. So right now, you look, you got him at 66.5 for this game against the Jets. I'm going to take the lower on it, and you should too. I'll tell you what, if you haven't tried underdog, you sign up and you get that free pick, Jordan Love just getting 1 yard, you can take the lower here on Tyreek Hill, or take whatever pick you're feeling, and you can start out with a win for your first time doing NFL picks on underdog. Just make sure you use that code ENDGAME when you sign up to take advantage of all the freebies. So then Jalen Waddle predictably did not follow up with another big game after his one random outburst the week before. What do you feel about Jalen Waddle against the Jets defense?
I can't feel good. I barely feel good about Tyreek Hill. I am not starting Jalen Waddle.
I mean, I don't want to start him, but I will at least say he should be a flex candidate. I mean, come on. It's the Bipocalypse. You could do worse. Falcons taking on the Vikings. Well, Drake London was the one guy who looked good for the Falcons last week in that passing game. I mean, there's concerns about Kirk Cousins, but there really shouldn't be about London, should there?
No concerns about London. 16 targets, and now he gets the Vikings, who have been terrible against wide receivers. I think Drake London a very strong start this week.
If anything, London is as close to a must-start as there should be. This matchup really shouldn't scare you. In fact, the Vikings defense as a whole starting to get a little bit closer to average the last few weeks. So London, very strong start. Darnell Mooney, on the other hand, he has started to slow down. Is he still startable?
I think he's still startable, but only really a flex option. He's got upside, but he's got risk.
Agree. Got to put him down in that flex tier. Maybe he bounces back, but Kirk Cousins would need to bounce back big time first. Let's see it. And then for the Vikings, Jordan Addison, apparently not the new number one receiver there. Go figure. Is he still somebody that you could start, though?
Yeah, we said like there's going to be a game where Justin Jefferson's going to be the guy, and we saw it, and it's probably going to be Justin Jefferson again this week being the guy, but it is a good matchup for him. He does have upside. Again, risky, but he's got upside, kind of like Darnell Mooney. You can flex him.
Now, I do feel better about Addison than Mooney because, again, this Falcons defense has been pretty generous to wide receivers, but Addison's target share is also so unpredictable, so I would just say a high-end flex. Now, hopefully this video helps you with all your start-sit decisions, but if you still have questions for start-sit, waiver wire trades, or anything fantasy football related, use the Draft Lane app because that connects you directly with Chris and myself for all your fantasy football needs. Download it for free right now. The Saints at the Giants, maybe not a whole lot of passing yardage in this game. If somebody benefits for the Saints, I guess it's got to be Marquez Valdes-Scantling because he's pretty much the last man standing there, literally a wide receiver. And he keeps scoring touchdowns. Is MVS going to do it again?
He might. I think you got to gamble on it. I mean, just understand what you're getting here. Like, we're talking about 2 catches and a touchdown, so it's either you get that touchdown or you don't, and he, kills you. But if you're desperate, he's got upside at least, so risky flex.
Right, and I'll say this, if you're in a non-PPR league, hey, maybe he is a solid start for you because a touchdown's worth a lot more. But in most PPR leagues, even half PPR, can't be more than a flex. And then probably the toughest one here. I mean, just tough to see Malik Neighbors having to deal with that situation for the Giants. So where do you rank him?
I'm going to rank him just as a solid start because he gets so many targets and it is the Saints. He at least gives you a floor. Like, there's no ceiling, but at least there's a floor, so solid start.
Sadly, that's exactly it. He's a floor play. I mean, when's the last time he scored a touchdown? Week 5? I don't know. Malik Neighbors clearly is not going to have a huge game unless something Well, until next season when they get a new quarterback. But for now, he could still give you some points, so solid start. Now, Wan'Dale Robinson, I mean, is the floor even there?
No floor, no ceiling, no chance he's in any of my lineups.
Nah, I'm done with him. Avoid. Panthers at the Eagles this week. All right, so Adam Thielen is starting to come back, but this might be a tough time for him to do that against this Philly defense.
Yeah, this is a very tough matchup here, but at the same time, 10 targets, could have had an even bigger game. I don't think you could outright bench Adam Thielen, but I think this week, because it's a tough matchup, you could flex him, but probably just more of a floor play.
Exactly. Full PPR, he'll get you some catches, some yards, so flex. What about the rookie Xavier Legette?
He did have 8 targets last week. He does get involved, but again, this is a very tough matchup. I'm going to avoid Legette.
Right. Can't feel great even about Thielen, who's going to be the main slot guy. Won't see a lot of Mitchell and those other corners on the outside. Legette will. The upside just way too limited here. Should probably just avoid. And then for the Eagles, I mean, you're still starting A.J. Brown. No questions asked. Devontae Smith missed the game again. Can you trust him if he does come back this week?
It would be hard to trust him. I mean, even A.J. Brown is getting kind of hard to trust because they got Saquon Barkley. They just don't throw the ball as much. I know it's the Panthers, but still, I'm going to say Devonta Smith, only a flex start this week.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It's the Panthers, the worst run defense in the NFL, going against Saquon Barkley. Could we see the single season rushing record broken this week? Okay, probably not, but still. Are they going to have to throw the ball? Are they going to force Devontae Smith to stretch the field? Probably not. A very risky flex. So next we got the Browns taking on the Steelers on the road. This sounds like a tough matchup, and it is, but man, Jameis Winston and Jerry Jeudy just seem to not care. Jeudy with a nice game against his former team, but can he do it against Pittsburgh?
I don't see why not at this point. I mean, Jameis Winston, they're slinging it. They can't run the football in Cleveland. They have to throw it a ton. Jerry Jeudy getting the targets. I think Jerry Jeudy this week, even in this tough matchup, is a solid start.
Yeah, I think he's got to be based on how many targets he's getting, how good Winston is looking. And look, I'll tell you what, Jameis Winston is not Joe Burrow and Jerry Jeudy is not Jamar Chase, but Pittsburgh just gave up a ton of points to the Bengals. It's not like they are completely shutting down opposing passing offenses these days, so it's a tough matchup, but I think Judy's still solid. Now, what about Elijah Moore? Also put up numbers last week, but do you feel as strongly about him?
You can't feel as strongly about him as you do for Jerry Jeudy, but I still think he's at least like a solid flex play.
Yeah, I think that's fair. In a full PPR league, I think he can be flexed because he's still getting targeted. Now, Cedric Tillman missed Week 13. Still unclear whether he'll be ready to go for Week 14. If he is, do you give him a go?
I'd be very nervous putting him in my lineup, but at the same time, he did have some nice games with Jameis, so I'll say he's a flex as well. Risky flex.
Yeah, I think he's more touchdown dependent. This is what he was doing earlier in the season until he started giving way to Jeudy as the lead receiver. There is a little bit of upside here, so if he's clear early in the week, you could flex him. And then there's George Pickens, continues to make highlight-worthy plays on and off the field. What is George Pickens going to do against this Browns defense?
I think he'll be much better than what we saw like a couple weeks ago in that snow game. I think George Pickens, right now for me, George Pickens with Russ is just going to probably be an every week strong start.
Yeah, he's got to be. And the main thing is, like you mentioned, Russ is cooking. He's looking legit. He has unlocked Pickens. Pickens has not had a bad game since Russ took over as a starter. And this Browns defense, not scary at all. So, strong start. Then Calvin Austin caught a touchdown, made another big play, but then left later in the game with an injury. If he's cleared to come back here, would you flex him?
He's another one of these very risky flexes. He could get you nothing, or he could have one big touchdown. Risky flex.
Yeah, I'll say at least he belongs in that same kind of category, like a Cedric Tillman. These days, I guess, like a Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith type. Big play / touchdown or bust. Now we got the Raiders taking on the Bucs. Battle of the Pirates going on here. The Raiders' number one receiver is definitely Jacoby Myers. Where does he rank?
Gotta feel good about Jacoby Myers this week. I know he didn't have a huge game last week, but almost 100 yards receiving, 11 targets, and now it's the Bucs. I don't think I can quite say strong start for Jacoby Myers, but very, very solid start.
I almost want to say he's a must start. If I have Jacoby Myers, there's no way I'm not starting him. He actually wound up being very productive the last 2 weeks against two of the toughest pass defenses out there. And now he gets Tampa Bay. It's almost too good to be true, and we know how that goes. But look, if I have Myers, there's no way I'm not starting him. And then partly because it's the Bipocalypse, and, we're going to have to get a little deeper than usual here. Partly because it's the Bucs defense, and also because we have a new quarterback for the Raiders. Trey Tucker made a nice play last week. Does he have flex value?
No. 1 target, 1 catch, a 58-yard touchdown. That is very risky even against the Bucs. I'm not doing it.
We just talked about guys like Calvin Austin, Tillman, touchdown or bust. Touchdown or bust is pretty much Trey Tucker all season long, and it's been a lot more bust. So this is probably a little too reachy. Jaguars at the Titans. It's a little tricky because we don't know if Trevor Lawrence is going to play or not. I guess let's assume it might be Mac Jones. What does that mean for Brian Thomas Jr.?
It doesn't mean good things for Brian Thomas Jr. I know he came through last week with Mac Jones in that second half, but I'm not banking on that again. This is the Tennessee Titans. Risky flex.
Yeah, it's still risky here because the Titans, although they haven't been quite as tough, still not giving up big games to wide receivers, and I'm still not going to trust Mac Jones just because he put up some garbage time stats. Yeah, risky flex. Now, even though a lot of it was in come from behind mode, Parker Washington had a 100-yard game, and he actually led the Jags in targets. Is this the making of something? Would you consider him a flex?
I don't know if it's a making of something because, Parker Washington was there the previous couple games that Mac Jones started, and I don't really remember him doing anything in those games. I'm not chasing this. I'm going to avoid him.
Well, that is a good point. It's not like he came out of nowhere. He's been there, but, I will say if Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback somehow, he's flex worthy. If it's Mac Jones, maybe barely flex worthy, only because it's the Bimageddon. Now for Tennessee, Calvin Ridley took a little bit of a step back last week, so he's still been pretty consistently productive. Do you keep trusting him?
Every time I trust him is when he busts, but I got to trust him again this week because it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. I can't say like a strong start or anything, but I think he's a solid start.
He's got to be. It's the Jaguars defense, revenge game. You know how that goes. Okay, look, Calvin Ridley should get better. I don't know if he'll explode this game, but he should be at the very least a solid start. And then there's good old Nick Westbrook-Akine. So aside from the touchdown, which he inevitably will score, what else will he do?
Might not do anything else, but it might not matter. If he keeps scoring touchdowns, it doesn't really matter. It's the Jaguars. He's risky, but you can flex him for that touchdown upside.
He has to at least be a flex. Again, the matchup, the touchdowns. Okay, let's not get crazy here. He's not getting that many receptions, and the yardage is capped, so he's a flex. All right, now let's talk Seahawks at the Cardinals. These teams met a couple of weeks ago. Now, DK Metcalf didn't really have a big game last week, and then he did get a little bit banged up. Remember, he was limping off the field at one point. So, if DK is good to go, where do you rank him?
I still am going to put DK Metcalf in the strong starts. He had 9 targets in this game. JSN only 4. Had like a 45% to 15% first read percentage. I know JSN still somehow outproduced him, but DK is the number one here. He's got the upside. It's the Cardinals. That doesn't scare me. I'm going to say strong start.
I don't know if I can view him as a strong start anymore because he hasn't had those big games. JSN has been more involved. Yes, DK clearly took on the role of target hog, I guess, if you will, last week. I don't know. I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen again. I'm going to say he's at least a solid start, though. So how do you feel about JSN this week?
I don't feel great. I did have some caution with him last week after his 3 big games saying, hey, it looks like he's going back to the old JSN. Now he looks even more like the old JSN, although he still had a decent yardage game. But he is involved. He could rack up yards, so I'll say barely a solid start because of the matchup.
Barely a solid start. Wow, okay. I mean, look, 6 for 77 and a touchdown last time he faced the Cardinals. Probably do something comparable here. I think he's a more high-end solid start. Now let's talk Marvin Harrison Jr. You know that squeaky wheel game he was supposed to have? Well, at least he scored a touchdown, right? Going against Seattle this time, what do you expect?
I mean, he did have 12 targets last week, so they tried. They definitely tried. I like Marvin Harrison this week. I'm not going to say strong start or anything, but I think he's a solid start.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same about him as the other two Seattle receivers, which, by the way, you might notice we didn't even mention Tyler Lockett because you don't need to think about Tyler Lockett. Marvin Harrison always is going to be kind of a boom bust solid tier receiver, if that makes sense, right? It's like you can't just outright bench him. You can't ever feel wonderful with him in your lineup. But I guess that makes him a solid, maybe low-end wide receiver too in most of your PPR leagues. And we did see Michael Wilson get a little more involved last week. Do you think that carries over?
Probably not. This just feels like one of those games, like this happens once or twice or 3 times a year, where a random wide receiver on a random team has a random, decent game. Not chasing this. I'm not starting Michael Wilson.
Right, and you might want to think about it because there's so many teams that are out this week, but I think you can do better, so let's pass on Michael Wilson. Bills taking on the Rams this week. Let's start with Amari Cooper, who, is barely clinging to fantasy relevance here. Can you even consider Amari Cooper these days?
No chance. Barely clinging to fantasy relevance is being generous.
You could point to, he was hurt the last couple of weeks, and they didn't really have to pass the ball last week. How many excuses can we make here, though? Has he had a good game as a Buffalo Bill? And no, let's not count the random lucky touchdown in the very first game. Now, I don't think you want to chase this lack of targets. Now, Khalil Shakir is getting most of the targets in this pass offense. How strongly do you feel about him?
I feel good about him. I know he didn't come through last week, but that was Snowmageddon. This is not going to be the case because they're going to be in Los Angeles. Don't have to worry about that. There's no snow in Los Angeles. I think Shakir, a solid start this week.
Yeah, he should be pretty solid. This is a game that should be competitive. He's the one receiver that Josh Allen seems to trust the most. It's a good matchup. Very solid. And we haven't seen rookie Keon Coleman for a while because of that hand injury. If he comes back, would you roll with him?
It's not a bad matchup against the Rams, but very risky here. Very, very risky flex.
He's really going to be that boom bust type as it is. And then coming off a multi-week absence, very risky. You know what? I'm probably just going to avoid him for now. And then you still have to keep rolling out both those Rams receivers and Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, even though I know Kupp didn't do much last week. Demarcus Robinson's still there. He also suffered a hand injury last week. So if he's good to go, can he be flexed in this bye heavy week?
He's another guy, one of these guys, he could score and save your day and be flex worthy. Or if he doesn't, you're probably going to wish you didn't start him. So again, another risky flex.
Yeah, but I'll say, this Bills, really tough defense against wide receivers, that injury, all told, I'm going to look elsewhere for my touchdown upside. All right, time to look at the wide receivers from the Bears and 49ers matchup. How the turntables. Now we have to consider these Bears receivers, all of them. I don't know how heavily we can consider the Niners. Start with DJ Moore.
After last week, it's tempting to put him in the strong start tier, but I don't think I can go quite that high yet with DJ Moore. I'll just say very solid start this week.
Yeah, if this was any sort of a smash spot, and again, this Niners defense is a shell of what it was last year, but still, if this was like the Jags or the Bucs or something, I might go and put him in the strong tier, but for now, let's just keep him in the solid tier, but very solid. What about Keenan Allen? He has been the leading receiver for 2 straight weeks since Shane Waldron was gone.
Again, I'm going to say Keenan Allen, a very solid start this week.
I'm going to slightly bump him up. I'll say a barely strong start because he's getting the touchdowns. He's getting the most targets. He's just actually looked more like vintage Keenan Allen. And again, this matchup doesn't scare me. So, look, I feel good enough. If I have Keenan Allen, I'm probably just starting him. Now, Rome Odunze, he's still getting targeted, but the catchable rate for him has been far lower. Not sure what's the deal here. Do you think he gets right?
Maybe. He probably will at some point, but good luck guessing when that is. I am not going to start Rome Odunze this week.
Yeah, I feel like there's still so much potential here, so many near misses. This week I can still consider him a flex because I like him better than a lot of those other flex options we've already mentioned. Now, here's the big question probably at the position is, what do you do with Deebo? Deebo Samuel, I can't even remember the last time he had a top 12 or even top 20 wide receiver finish for fantasy.
Can't feel good. This is a tough matchup against the Bears. It'll be better than last week because it's not in the snow, but I'm going to say Deebo Samuel, a risky flex.
Yeah, what we're hoping for here, again, we meaning anybody who has Deebo Samuel, is that with CMC and Mason both out, maybe they do put him back in the backfield more, actually throw more screens and try to get him more manufactured touches. But still, man, this offense is just looking rough. Trent Williams still out. Risky flex. Now, for what it's worth, Juwan Jennings is still serving as the number one wide receiver here, but what is that worth?
It's not worth a whole lot this week against the Bears. I think I'm going to have to move Juwan Jennings down also to the flex.
Agree. Flex because of the matchup and just everything that's going on in San Francisco. And Sunday night, it's going to be the Chargers at the Chiefs. So just when Ladd McConkey was breaking out, did suffer a knee injury late in that game. It didn't seem serious, but you never know. We're going to have to definitely keep a close eye on this. So if Ladd is good to go, on the road at Arrowhead, also not ideal.
Not ideal, but the Chiefs aren't strong against the slot, and Ladd McConkey has been so good. I don't even care that it's the Chiefs, honestly. I'm going to say strong start if he plays.
Yeah, one thing that really stands out is the target share. Double-digit targets while no other Chargers receiver even reached 5. I mean, yeah, at this point, the matchup doesn't matter. If you got Ladd, he's a strong start. Now, if Ladd is out or limited, that could benefit a guy like Josh Palmer, who might move to the slot a little bit more. But even so, what would you feel about Palmer?
Not good. I would not feel good about Josh Palmer, not starting Josh Palmer unless I was unbelievably desperate.
If what I said happened and Ladd is out or highly questionable on game time, I could flex Palmer. Otherwise, I would sit him. And then as far as Quentin Johnston goes, not sure it even matters. I don't want Quentin Johnston in my lineup.
No chance. Not starting him.
Now, what about DeAndre Hopkins? This game, do you think he gets a little bit more involved?
Think so. He got 9 targets last week, had a decent game. Chargers, like, kind of middle of the road against wide receivers. I think he's high-end flex.
Yeah, I mean, you look what Drake London did against this Chargers defense last week, and you think, I mean, this isn't a shutdown pass defense, but you also realize that DeAndre Hopkins looked like Drake London maybe 10 years ago. So Hopkins to me is still just a flex. And what do you expect for Xavier Worthy and his usage in this matchup?
Pretty much the same thing I always expect from Xavier Worthy, but I will say, because he's getting more involved and he's actually catching some passes, he at least gives you a floor now, so I'm not like, he's not a boom-bust flex anymore, but he's still a flex.
Agree. A little less boom-bust than he used to be early in the season, agree with that, but I don't know if I'll ever put him as more than a flex this year. Then the Monday night game is going to be the Bengals at the Cowboys. T. Higgins, I mean, you can make an argument that he's a must-start at this point. He's out-targeting Jamar Chase semi-regularly.
Yeah, pretty close to a must-start. I know I said earlier, I think I said Drake London, the strongest of the strong starts. Maybe it's T. Higgins this week.
Agree. You got T. Higgins, no reason not to start him. Sadly, we can't say that anymore for CeeDee Lamb, and now questions about that shoulder. If it doesn't act up and he's good to go, is he a strong start?
I think he has to be against the Bengals, this defense. If his shoulder is good and he plays, even with Cooper Rush, I think he's a strong start.
Yeah, I think because of the matchup, like you said, the Bengals get in nothing but shootouts. That defense is just horrible these days. So if CeeDee's good to go, I think you got to start him. And one more Cowboys receiver to talk about, Brandon Cooks is back. Again, this does have some shootout potential. Does that make you interested in Cooks?
It's got to make you interested. He scored last week. He's risky. He's another one of these guys. If he doesn't score, you're probably going to wish you didn't start him, but the potential is there in this game. Risky flex.
There you go. He did get targeted quite a bit. Again, they're probably going to have to pass the ball a whole lot this week, so you can flex Cooks. And you also want to know who to start at running back, quarterback, tight end. Of course, we got you covered. Check out the Week 14 playlist for everything you need to win.